All right, folks, on the line with me today here on Do You Know Jack Radio Show is Noel Monk, former manager of Van Halen from 1978 to 1985, who has written a brilliant book called Runnin With The Devil, a backstage pass to the wild times, loud rock, and the down and dirty truth behind the making of Van Halen. Noel, how you doing, man?
I'm doing real good. How are you doing?
Great, man. It's nice to hear your voice. I mean, I've sort of been going back and forth about time slots and various other things for, the better part of the summer, so I'm glad to finally get you on the line.
Okay. I thought maybe David Ross would be on because he's the only one who would want to be on since he loves to talk. Otherwise, I can't blame him. Anyhow.
Well, now, I was just going to say, from a managerial perspective, I mean, it's not like over the years you've done a whole lot of interviews per se. So, I mean, how are you finding things? Are you finally starting to get used to it now that you've sort of gone in the swing of doing the whole buck?
Oh, I have no problem with talking. I've always felt that the manager should shut up and let the band talk. As a matter of fact, I've done 2 interviews, one in Cashbox, 79, and one in Music Life in 79. And that one was kind of hard to read because it was in Japanese. But basically, I never did interviews, and not a big deal for me.
Yeah. But I mean, one thing that you had done quite a lot of before your time in Van Halen is you'd worked with a wide variety of bands and in a lot of different capacities, from what I understand. I mean, you do mention in the book about the Sex Pistols, which that must have been quite the interesting time, and I know you wrote a book about that as well.
I loved that tour. I wouldn't mind being on it again. I mean, I ended up rooming with Sid, and Sid was one of the great, wonderful people. Mm-hmm. He is so misunderstood. I have a thing. He never killed Nancy. 1, he loved her too much, and 2, if you've ever known junkies, which unfortunately I have, if you see a junkie shooting up, you tell me that after they've shot up, they feel like killing someone. It's just not.
Yeah.
It's not the MO. I mean, they're happy, they're doing well. Where they were saying, and Chelsea was a real sleazebag, and Nancy, it made a lot of enemies. But I know you want to talk about Van Halen.
Definitely.
I will tell you what you want to know if I know it. I will say one thing, that one of the reasons I wrote the book was there are too many people out there right now who are starting to write about it.
Yeah.
And they either never saw the band or never spent more than 20 minutes with them. And I started actually looking at my, I would Google myself, and I'd find out that I died 8 years ago, or that I was a New York City policeman. Yeah. And the unfortunate thing about the internet is you can't get rid of it. This idiot that put me down as a New York City policeman, there's no way I can take that off.
Yeah.
I don't mind dying on the air, but gives up a little bit of intrigue. But it still makes it impossible to take off what these fools write.
Yeah.
So I thought I would set everything straight from my point of view.
And you definitely have.
I tried, and I've been writing since 1990 after I did the Pistol book, which was 12 Days on the Road, the Sex Pistols in America, which did well, but it was more of a niche band.
Yeah.
And so I started just writing stories in between projects. And then I guess about 3.5 years ago, I decided it's time to do it. I've got too many things going on that I'm reading that's really total bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, and it started to annoy me.
Yeah. from what I understand now, you sort of wrote the book almost like it was, kind of a movie plot type thing going on. Am I right?
If you know of a good producer, send him my way. I'd love to make a movie out of it.
Yeah.
Actually, we did write it in a movie format.
Yeah.
And, Jack, it's the kind of thing where it lends itself to a movie, and, it'll be another project, but I also have a television project I'm working on, so
Hmm.
I keep myself busy.
Well, now it seems now that, speaking of the band Van Halen as characters, you've sort of got David, the, Jekyll and Hyde ringleader of the group, at least early on. You've got Eddie, the shy, misunderstood genius.
Well, he's pretty understood.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know one misunderstands Ed. They just wonder why he says what he says. I mean, 30 years later, he's still talking about Michael. Now, here's this brilliant guitar player that's got nothing more to say than, I taught Michael how to play bass. Well, that's good for the first 10 minutes, but after 29 years, it gets a little boring.
Yeah.
And, he's still beating up on him, and I just don't understand it myself. But
yeah,
and I'm sure Ed has a reason, and it's usually a fairly ignorant one. I don't know if you've ever had him on, but
I wish.
Not exactly quick on the draw. Well, yeah, I guess it'd be okay as a kudo, but you're not going to get much out of him outside of who he hates and why he hates him. And 30 years ago he got a hernia and hemorrhoids. We're talking about a guy who, I don't know if he can still talk. He hasn't got enough tongue.
Yeah.
He's got chutzpah, but he lost a lot of tongue.
Yeah.
Al ate most of it.
Well, that's what I was going to say is, you portray Alex, at least towards the end of the book, almost like a Judas type figure. But I mean, was he really just looking out for his younger brother or sort of doing his brother's dirty work, do you think?
No, it's kind of the other way around. If your younger brother, 2 years younger than you, is a genius at what he does, and Ed certainly was, and you were an excellent drummer, but nobody wanted to interview Al. He was a good backing drummer, and he did some interesting stuff, but it was always Ed. And I don't know whether that's what drove him to become an alcoholic or it was family-oriented, but after, 6, 7 years of hearing about your brilliant brother, and the only reason you're in the band, I mean, he would have gone the way Michael went if it wasn't for the fact that his name was Van Halen.
You make that pretty abundantly clear in the book that, Michael and Alex perhaps couldn't have existed as session musicians outside of the band, but as you said on the outset of the interview, Michael was kind of the whipping boy of the group, and especially Eddie, and but for whatever reason, well, I mean, we know the reason. Like, Alex was never really seen the same way they looked at Michael's talent and skills.
No, they picked on Michael from day one, but in kind of it used to be kidding. I remember when Marshall was doing tapes, and at that point, he had a whole funny routine with Michael, and it was all very humorous in the beginning. And it went from there progressively more into, a nasty attitude. And Michael just took it. I don't know why. That was always, something that I never understood. Someone beat me up like that, I think I would take umbrance to it, but I think you would too.
I've often thought, now this is my opinion, okay, fine, like Michael's bass skills aside, he was a phenomenal singer, and I'm not sure, if Van Halen would have had the same sound without him.
Without that voice, he had a brilliant, wonderful voice. I mean, it wasn't Maria Callas, but he definitely took up the slack where, David had people knock him for not having a brilliant voice. Well, he had a rock and roll voice.
Yeah.
He had a perfect voice for Van Halen. It was gravelly, it was rough, it was whatever.
It had swagger.
Yeah, it had swagger and it had a tone and temperament to it. It never bothered me that he didn't sing opera, really. It was a good fit for the band. It was a very well-balanced band.
Mm-hmm.
Not mentally, but musically.
Now, reading through the pages of this book, I mean, I know Van Halen was a 70s rock and roll band, so I mean, I guess this shouldn't be surprising, but it seemed like you were on Damage Control a whole lot, and there was times where, there was nothing that you could have really done to prevent whatever, hotel room damage or limousine damage was about to happen, so you just sort of let the boys off leash every now and again to do as they would, per se.
Well, I'm no angel. And after being on the road for 25 years, I've wrecked a few rooms myself. It's not like it surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
What surprises me is people say, well, why didn't you have an intervention and save them from themselves? Which is a pretty foolish thing to say because, at that point, they think nothing is wrong. And in a rock and roll lifestyle, nothing is wrong.
Yeah.
But it wasn't so much trashing hotel rooms, which certainly didn't bother me. You paid for it.
Yeah.
But it was the other things, putting David in the straitjacket. I mean, I thought that was kind of cute. He should have had actually a tie-dyed one. It was unfortunately just a white one.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the band was throughout that whole time that you were with them, and you see this whole time as the definitive era of the band, and I don't think anybody would argue with that. But I mean, they never really recorded anything live apart from the disastrous Us Festival stuff that seems to be out there in abundance.
No, that was a disaster, all right. But Van Halen never did a bad show, except the Us Festival.
Which
they could have been screwed up beyond belief, but they hit that deck and they were professional.
Mm-hmm.
They never did a show that sucked. I mean, they always came across, but give us $1.5 million and we will screw it up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a given.
Yeah. Well, now you worked this book with Joe Layden, but I think you've known Joe for a while, or at least known of Joe for a while, right? I mean, what did he bring to the table in terms
Joe
of?
is a brilliant. I had on my first book, I had this guy from Rolling Stone, and I didn't want it in third person, and
Mm-hmm.
he was, typical arrogant jerk. And he put it in third person. It should have been in first.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of ruined the book. But Joe, absolutely brilliant. Did 30 books, and people are clamoring to get him because I'm a good writer. Not great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But Joe is like butter. He is absolutely wonderful. Can't say enough about him.
Did you and Joe have a process for sort of weeding out which stories would be in there? I mean, obviously the Brown M&M's story had to be in there. I mean, you can't talk about Van Halen without mentioning it.
Didn't have to, but yeah, well, we didn't do it that way. The way you really normally write a book is I come with a lot of stories that I've written, and I would talk to people and I would transcribe them, And then Joe and I spent uh, 2, 3 days getting to know each other. And in a year and a quarter working together, we never had one argument.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we got along really well. But a third of what we wrote didn't go in the book. They didn't want War and Peace.
Yeah.
I have enough to do another 200-page book, but I really am looking forward to doing a book on starting with the Fillmore, with Janis and the Dead and the
Yeah.
Doors, and these are really very close friends of mine as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have an idea for another book and a TV show.
Awesome.
I need a producer. If you can find one for me, I would love it.
Well,
But they're good producers who are hard to find. Let's put it that way.
yeah, yeah. There you go. Well, listen, Noel. Just before I let you go, one more thing that I definitely wanted to talk to you about is how you had the presence of mind to protect Van Halen's merch and in particular the T-shirt sales back in the day. And now, given the turgid waters of the music industry now, I mean, you see, like, in some respects you're almost ahead of your time, because I've talked to so many musicians over the years who've essentially called themselves glorified T-shirt salesmen just because of the fact that it's exceedingly difficult to make money with recorded music these days.
Well, it was pretty simple. My father was a manufacturer's rep in children's dresses. He sold them. He
Mm-hmm.
was a middleman. And I grew up watching them cut garments, and I knew the markup. Most bands get paid about 25 cents on the dollar, and this was total rip-off. I was making us 50 cents on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
But of course they just threw my company away, and so they went back to making 25%. But it was a lot of work, and the biggest thing we had to do was get rid of the bootleggers, and we got the first federal nationwide injunction to confiscate shirts, and that was a lot of fun. I love beating up on bootleggers.
For some reason, as I was reading that part, I pictured the Spinal Tap manager with his cricket bat.
Yeah, I don't think I was as good as he was. I think the best manager I came across was a guy named Dick Waterman, who was Bonnie Raitt's manager. He was a wonderful guy. Most of them are a bunch of they lucked into their position.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't run a foul spot if they tried. And they never sued me for taking money because I never took money.
Yeah.
But most managers get nailed for the money they took.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I know you got to go, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for calling in.
And it was fun.